Hi there, I'm Daryl, and welcome to another video in my Board Gems series. Board Gems is a video series in which I go over an older game, maybe a long-forgotten game, or at least one that most of the hobby has since passed by, and I revisit it and I say, hey, this is a gem, guys, we should probably still be playing this game. Now what we have here is something like 11 games. These are all the games in the Alea medium box series. Alea being an imprint of Ravensburger, and they kind of specialize in more hobby games. They do release some family-friendly games as well, like Las Vegas. But they're games that they have their own kind of editorial style, I'll put it that way. And of course they like to release games in sort of a kind of a bookshelf format, so they look very nice on the shelf together. And this is the complete medium box series, ranging from Louis XIV in around 2005 to the second edition of San Juan, which would be 2013, 2014, something like that. So we've got about a little under 10 years worth of games here. Obviously, I'm not going to cover all these games in one video. Today, I want to focus on one particular game, which is this one. This is Alea Iacta Est. Now, it was designed by Jeffrey Allers and Bernd Eisenstein. It's for 2 to 5 players. This edition is ages 9 and up, 10 and up, fine. The new edition is 10 and up. And takes about 30 to 60 minutes to play. The more players, the longer it'll take. And as I just said, there's a new version of it, which is why I'm covering this game today. This one came out just a couple of years ago, and it's called Order of the Gilded Compass. This was published by Grey Fox Games. Functionally identical to the old edition, except the new edition has some more variety. I'm going to show you how to play Order of the Gilded Compass. I'm going to use Order of the Gilded Compass, but the buildings I'm going to use are the ones that are used in the old edition. So you will learn both games if you learn this one. I'll show you how it plays first, then afterwards we'll talk about why it's still a board gem today. Now we will be setting up Order of the Gilded Compass the same way as the original Alea Iacta Est game was set up. Order of the Gilded Compass comes with some variety. Order of the Gilded Compass has a variety of buildings. One of that set of buildings is the same set of buildings that's in Alea Iacta Est. So if I teach you this set of buildings, you learn both games. First, you're going to set up the A buildings. There's 3 A buildings. First is the archives, there's the university, and there's the library. Next to the library, you're going to place these knowledge/reroll tokens. The university, you are going to add these kind of inserts based on the number of players. You're just going to have this for 2 players, but for a 4-player game, for example, you're going to do this. You're going to add a B building, which for Alea Iacta Est would be the equivalent of this one, the Treasure Hunters Guild. And put that to the side of the archives. And if you're playing with 4 or 5 players, you're also going to add another building, which in this game is the Sunken Galleon. In a 2 or 3 player game, you're not going to use this building. Order of the Gilded Compass also has a variant in which you would play this with this building with fewer than 4 players, but you'd use a dummy player. I don't know about you, but I really don't like using dummy players. So just play without this building if you're playing with 2 or 3 players, but we're going to set it up for a 4-player game. Next to the Sunken Galleon, you're going to add these tiles, these little treasure chest tiles, and they range in value from 1 to 3. You're going to put them all face down and mix them up. And place next to the Sunken Galleon, like so. For the archives, you're going to shuffle up these tiles, which are the map tiles. You're going to shuffle these up, and at the start of every round, and there's going to be 5 or 6 rounds, depending on the number of players, and you're going to add 4. And usually I put them kind of above the archives, like so. And finally, next to the Treasure Hunters Guild, you're going to add these. I forget what the rules call them, but they're basically end of game scoring tiles. So you're going to mix these up and just keep them nearby. And near the university, you are going to have these tiles, which are called specialist tiles. And you're going to mix these up face down. At the start of every round, you are going to add one face up under here for each of these spaces here. The last thing to do for setup is to give each player all the dice of a single color. It's 8 dice. And I believe they also start with 1 reroll token. Every player starts with one of those. So the game takes place over a number of rounds, 5 or 6 rounds depending on the number of players. On a player's turn, play is clockwise. They're going to be rolling their dice and adding 1 or more of their dice to one of the 5 buildings. The main ways of scoring points is to get maps and specialists and to combine them. Each map has a number on the top and the bottom, a little fraction there. The top number is how many points you get for this map if you have at least 1 specialist assigned to it. The lower number is how many points you get if you have no specialists. You can assign specialists, these are the specialists. At the end of the game, you can assign any specialists you've collected to your map tiles. But there are restrictions. You'll see each specialist has a color, and it also has a symbol. You can't really see very well probably, but there's different symbols here for the 2 different types of specialists. At the end of the game, each map tile can have at most 2 specialists, 1 of each type, and those specialists have to be the same color as the map tile. And you'll see a little symbol on here matches the symbol on the tile in case there's any confusion. So for example, if you had these 2 specialists, you can add both of them to this map tile. And as a result, you're going to get points. Because you have at least 1 specialist assigned to the map tile, you're going to get 4 points. In addition, you're going to get the number of points for the specialists. You only get points for a specialist you've collected if that specialist is assigned to a map. So generally, you're trying to collect specialists and map tiles of the same colors. At the end of the game, you can assign them together and get the most points. But there's other ways of getting points. These are treasure tiles, which are gotten at the sunken galleon, and they'll score you 1 to 3 points at the end of the game. And these, I forget what the rules call them, but I think they're called mission tiles. But basically they give you either a little bonus or something that allows you to score more points at the end of the game if you have a certain situation in hand, or you get extra points for things other players wouldn't. This is a little end of game kind of extra. In some cases it's actually an extra map, like in this case. You could actually assign specialists to this map. But generally speaking, they're for the end of the game. So determine a start player randomly. You have dice, you can always roll those to figure it out. They're going to get the start player token, and this is going to pass clockwise round to round. On a player's turn, the player takes all of their dice and rolls them, and then chooses 1 building and adds 1 or more dice to that building. If it is absolutely impossible to add to any of these 4 buildings, you can always just add any old die to the library. At the end of the round, you'll get a little knowledge token for that, a reroll. And I should point out, with these reroll tokens, after you roll the dice, if you're not happy, you can spend a reroll token, take any number of dice that you've already rolled, and re-roll them. And as long as you have reroll tokens, you can keep doing that. You can choose to keep some and re-roll others, but at some point, you're going to add 1 or more dice to these buildings. And here's how it works. In order to add dice to the university, you either have to add 1 die of any value, or 2 dice, 1 is a 1, 1 is a 4, or 2 dice, 1 is a 2 and 1 is a 3. So for example, I could take a 2, and a 3. And at the beginning, these would just go here, like there. But later on, if other players add dice to that same area, these dice actually get pushed along. So the lowest is always on here, and the highest is always on here. And new dice kick out old dice in the case of a tie. In this, a 4-player game, there's only room for 6 dice. As more dice get added, the highest values are going to get dropped off, and they'll automatically be sent to the library. At the end of the round, in this order, players will be able to choose specialists. In the case of the archives, you're able to add 1 or more dice of any value. But they all have to be the same value. Later on, you could add different dice. You could either, if you have more 6s later, you can add to it, or you can even start a new set with a different values, and you can add to those later. But you can never have the same number of dice all with the same value. So if later on green had these values, green could add, you can add any single die if you want to. You could do that, but green would not be able to add both of these because there's already a set of 2 6s. Could add 1, and then later on, if green rolls again and has this, then they could add both of those. And so now there's a different set. And these are ranked based on, first, the number of dice, and secondly, the value. So in this case, 3 different sets are of 3 dice, and so we look at the values. 6 would go before 3, 3 would go before 2, and finally the 6 would go. So in this case, green would have first pick of these 4 tiles. And then pink would have the second choice, blue the third choice, and so on. If there are any dice here, say from another player, and it comes to them and there's no map tiles remaining, then those remaining dice will just automatically go to the library. So at least they'll get you something at the end. The Treasure Hunters Guild works a little bit similarly, except that each player can only have at most 1 set. But in this case, the sets are runs, straights. So after a roll, you could add any number of dice, so long as they form a set. A run. You could even make a run of 1 die if you wanted to. And on a later turn, you could add to it. Assuming you had a 1 or a 4, you could add to your set, but you can only have 1 set. Each player can only have 1 set on here. And at the end of the round, the player who has the best set, and again, none of the sets can be identical. So if later on green rolls this, green can't actually add that exact same thing. They could add one of them, and then later on maybe hope to roll something like this, so then they can add both of these, because no set can be identical. And again, you're going to evaluate these at the end of the round by number of dice. And if it's a tie, you're going to go highest value to lowest value. What happens is the player with the most dice, or the player who is highest ranked, draws the top 3 mission tiles and secretly looks at them and chooses one to keep. They just put it face down in front of them. They pass the remaining 2 to whoever's in second. That player looks at the 2 remaining ones and keeps one. If it's a 5-player game, you're actually going to pass the 3rd one to the player in 3rd place. Otherwise, the 3rd one is actually just going to go under the stack and maybe will come up later, but maybe not. And again, anybody who has dice that are left in here and didn't get anything for them are going to automatically go to the library. And finally, the Sunken Galleon. This is a little bit of a strange one. The first player who goes in there can add a single die of any value. They then take a random tile, a treasure tile, They look at it and they just keep it face down in front of them for now. They don't own it yet, they just hang on to it for now. For the second player to go into that space, they have to play 2 dice. They have to play 2 dice. And the sum of these dice has to be greater than the 1 die already here. So let's say blue had this, decided to put a 1 and a 2 in here. They have 2 dice, and the sum is greater than purple's die. So blue takes 1 treasure chest per die and puts it in front of them for now. Later on, purple could add more dice, but they would have to add at least 2 more dice to get higher than the previous player, and again the sum would have to be higher than the existing sum. And for every die that you're able to add, you take another treasure chest. So in this way, you're going to have a number of sets, and each set will have more dice and a greater sum than the previous set. But again, you can add dice to your set to make it larger. But the player who has the most dice in their set gets to keep 2 tokens that they've collected. You draw 1 token for every die you're able to add. The player who has the best ranked set, so the player who has the most dice, gets to keep 2. And the remainder gets placed just face up for now to the side. And later on, if the draw pile is exhausted, then all the ones that are set aside face up are going to be flipped face down and mixed in to form a new draw pile. Any other player who has dice here gets to keep 1 of their tokens. Any others that they've collected will again go face up. That's how the 4 different buildings work. So on your turn, you take all 8 of your dice, roll them, and then assign some dice. And you can choose how many. So for example, even though I have 3 6s, I can choose for now to only put 2 6s in here if I want to, or even 1. It's up to me. And then every other player in clockwise order will go. When it comes back around to me, I take all my remaining dice and roll them. And I may go somewhere else, for example. And you keep doing this clockwise until one player uses up all 8 of their dice. You still finish that round around the table, so you're going to end to the player to the right of the start player, and then you evaluate each of the buildings. And at the end of the round, all the players are going to retrieve all their dice. You're going to pass the start player token clockwise. You're going to get a new set of specialists and a new set of 4 map tiles, and you're going to continue, and you're going to do that 5 or 6 times. Then at the end, players assign their specialists to their map tiles and also reveal their mission tiles, which may give them extra points, and also reveal all the treasure chest tiles they've collected. And finally, for every 2 knowledge/reroll tokens that you have not used during the course of the game, you still have at the end. For every 2, you're going to score 1 point. Total up your points, the player with the most wins. That's it. You're ready to play Order of the Gilded Compass and also Alea Iacta Est. I want to talk a little bit about the history, the time period that this game originally came out in. So this game came out in 2009. I want to say before 2005, 2006, it was in that kind of period of time between 2000 and 2005 that there was kind of a truism in the hobby, especially among people who like the German-style games. There was a truism that dice were bad. No exceptions. Because dice represented games like Monopoly and Risk and Cluedo. And it's like, oh, those games, no, luck is bad. We want to minimize that luck, right? So not eliminate luck. You can have a hand of cards and stuff. There's luck in there. But dice, ranging from 1 to 6, it's terrible. What about a roll and move? Terrible, right? And it was around the mid-2000s that you started to see some designers kind of experiment again with dice and say, no, we can have dice as an element, like a luck element, but still you can have lots of interesting decisions in the game. And this was kind of in a series of games that came out in the late 2000s. Contemporaneous games would have been stuff like Stone Age and Alien Frontiers. Alien Frontiers probably being the closest in spirit to this one of games. And of course, a little bit later, you'd have like Castles of Burgundy and stuff. And so the designers were experimenting with different ways of doing fun stuff with dice. Now, Alea Iacta Est kind of sits in an interesting position to me because, like I said, it compares probably the closest to Alien Frontiers. But Alien Frontiers is a meatier game, right? There's a little bit more meat on those bones. It's a bit of a longer game. Alien Frontiers games can take 75, 90 minutes. There's definitely more moving parts. By comparison, this one is very simple and I won't say streamlined, but it's a simple, it's a what maybe some people would have called a next step game. So you have the gateway games, which are the light, easy, fun games like Ticket to Ride. Then you have games that's like, well, you know, we're a family game. We want a family game, but we've played lots of family games. We want something that has a little bit more meat on those bones, but not too much, right? That would definitely fall into the category of what would now be the Kennerspiel, right? The sort of the next step games, the games for kind of experienced families who play a lot of games, and they might all be lighter games, but anyway, they're familiar with the language of games, and they can have stuff with a little bit more interesting decisions. I think this compares quite favorably to games like Stone Age. Now, I love Stone Age. Stone Age is a great game, was nominated for Spiel des Jahres. And that in that one, that's a worker placement game, in which you're putting down the workers, and then later on, you're rolling the dice, 1 die per worker. But again, 6 is better than a 1, right? My wife really gets frustrated with the luck in Stone Age. And you can mitigate with the tools in that. I like Stone Age quite a bit just as it is. But if you roll lots of 6s, that's a lot better than if you roll lots of 1s, and you can't really avoid that. In Alea Iacta Est, first of all, there's actual pluses to getting low dice, because you can put some of your low dice in the, I guess the Forum Romanum, which would be in this game, or this one would be the University. It's a good place to put your low dice, because the lowest dice will get the first picks of the specialists, or the patricians, senators, I forget what they call them in this game, but anyway, those little square tiles, people. But the bigger dice can also be used to kind of get first picks of other things. But even having dice in a particular place usually means you get something. And even if your dice end up not being useful at all, they go to the archive, not the archives, the library, I guess here, and then here at the latrina. And you still get a reroll token, so you'll be able to do more on your next turn. So it has some nice balancing aspects to it. And it's a shorter game than Stone Age, too. Stone Age pretty consistently takes, I mean, if you speed play it, it could probably take 45 minutes, but usually my games of Stone Age take closer to an hour. I guess it depends on the number of players, too. This box is 30 to 60 minutes. 30 if you're playing with, like, 2 players. 60 if you're playing with a full 5. But pretty consistently, yeah, 45, 50 minutes. So it's a nice, crisp game. Like, it moves along at a good pace. It's got some fun timing elements. For example, you want to be the first person to use up all your dice, if you can, because then you finish the round. Maybe there's some people who didn't get a chance to use their dice. But still, you want to put them in the right places so you get the most valuable stuff. Of the 2 editions, for modern hobbyists, I would definitely recommend this one. It's easily obtainable. It's not that expensive. And it comes with a lot more variety than the original one does. Bigger components too. It has a bit of a darker theme, so the buildings are all kind of this really dark color. Here's a question for you. This is a test. I suspect I'm in the minority on this one, but let's do a test. Of these 2 games, so these 2 themings, which would you say feels more mature? So if you were a person like me, who doesn't want to really play a game that looks like it's a kid's game, right? You want to play a game that you feel like, this is for adults. Yes. We're a couple of mature adults playing a modern game, yes. Which of these would you think is better suited for that? I would bet the vast majority of people watching this video will pick this one. This one has cartoony artwork. This one is kind of a bit more, certainly the presentation of the components is a lot kind of darker and serious, and this one is more light and lighthearted. But I disagree. I feel more comfortable playing this theming than this theming. And I'll tell you why. This is just a personal thing. This is me. Yes, this is a cartoony presentation, but it's Roman themed. It's still a real thing. There's no fantasy element in this. The Roman Empire was a real thing. And yes, you can have a cartoony representation of the Roman Empire, but it's still look, it's not a historical game, okay? It's a light glazing of a theme. It obviously can be about multiple topics, the exact same game, but the Roman theme, to me, is a mature kind of theme. And Order of the Gilded Compass, here's the thing about this one. This is, again, just my opinion. I'm sure I'm in the minority on this. Order of the Gilded Compass. To me, it sounds like the name of like a young adult fantasy novel, right? And it's like, I have no interest in that. You know, I don't want to play the Percy Jackson, the board game, or whatever, right? Like Order of the Gilded Compass, that's not a real thing, is it? It's a made-up thing. And if you look in the components, some of the elements are like magical artifacts and stuff. So it's like, okay, it's a little bit of a fantasy theme, and fantasy is what turns me off. It obviously is not necessarily a hidden gem because it was reprinted, right? This would have been a hidden gem until they reprinted it. Now there's a new version that's pretty easy to get. So, but the ratings for this one are not crazy high anyway, so I already feel like this version is going to get a little bit forgotten about in due time. I think this came out 3 or 4 years ago, and I really don't hear many people talking about it anymore, so already I think this is starting to kind of go out of people's minds. But before this disappears completely, have a look at it. It's a really nice dice placement game that stands shoulder to shoulder with games like Stone Age and Alien Frontiers. Just games that have interesting ways of using dice and interesting decisions to make every turn. If the dice aren't rolling the way you want, there's ways to mitigate that luck. There's always lots of interesting decisions. Another advantage of this new edition is that what in this edition are the SPQR tiles. I forget what they're called in this one, but they're the end game, usually end game bonuses, like you get X points for this, right? These are in English. This is kind of iconography, and you have to look it up in a little supplement sheet to figure out what they mean, and it's not very clear what they mean, in my opinion. Whereas this one, it also has a supplement sheet, but it has English on those tiles, so it's a little bit easier to, when you look at it, to go, oh, okay, that's what that means. So in that sense, this is good. There's a slight component misstep here in that 2 of the colors are very similar. I think one color is orange and one color is reddish-brown. Little too close. These colors stand out a little bit more. Personal opinion, unless you're looking at getting more of the Alea medium box series, so you want to have the set, like I do, don't worry about finding this particular edition unless you like the Roman theme, but again, the Roman theme is not strictly necessary. You don't feel incredibly thematic, but it's a lighthearted, fun theme. But this one's completely fine as well, the Order of the Gilded Compass. And this is the one. It's not very expensive. You should be able to find it in certainly a lot of online retailers. And don't let it pass you by. Do some research. Decide if it's something that interests you, and if it does, pick it up before this version disappears and becomes a forgotten gem. Thanks for watching. Remember, older games like Alea Iacta Est and Order of the Gilded Compass don't stop being good just because new games come out. Take care.